Okay, so let's get into looking at the training sessions. I'm going to do that with the help of this book. This is the book that I wrote about how we won the national championship and how we developed the players and basically everything we did. And if you listen to the last Facebook Live that I did, we talked about the build up to this, the formation, the style of play that we use, and all that kind of stuff, and the culture, the responsibilities of each position on the field, and we went into all that in some depth. And so in this one, we're going to look at the actual training sessions. I'm going to do it with the help of this book. Now, this book is available. Let me just show you this. Let me do that. And if you go to any of our websites, this is worldclasscoaching.com, and just click books and videos, you'll be able to find it in there real easy. I've got the Academy Soccer Coach session planner set up in case we want to animate any of these. But we'll just start off by taking a look at the book and going through the training sessions as I listed them in here. So this is the stuff we talked about yesterday. Chapter 9 is training sessions. So we'll get on to Chapter 9. And just quickly, let me just skip through here to see if there's anything worth mentioning here. Let's see. Training sessions were about 90 minutes long. I used to do a technical portion, warm-up part at the beginning, small group activity, but we always ended each session with a good 34 minutes of active stuff, whether it was small-sided games or the condition games or that kind of stuff. And we didn't really follow a system because it would depend on how we how we'd done the weekend before. So some weekends we could have played 3 or 4 games and then we would have practice on Tuesday. So rather than do a hard practice, we used to make that an easy practice. And some weekends we wouldn't play any games, so Tuesday would be a hard practice. And we used to go 3 days a week. We'd typically go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or something like that. Anyway, so that was our practice. So let's go look at the warm-ups, and I'm going to increase the size of this so that we can see those diagrams easier on the screen. So one of my favorite kind of warm-ups that I used to do was passing and moving warm-ups. And I do that a number of different ways. This was a really simple way. We'd split the team into 3 groups of 5, all in different color jerseys. And 2 teams would play against 1. And whichever team lost was responsible for losing possession of that ball became the defending team. So in this example, it's the whites defending against the dark shirts and the yellow shirts. But if the dark shirts make a mistake and lose possession, they're now the defending team and they have to defend the yellows and the whites. So it's pretty dynamic in that. The reason that I like these for warm-ups is they were active. Players don't like standing in lines or doing things that they have to think about. I found anyway. But this replicated what you would play for or how you would play in a real game. So I used to do lots of different variations of this kind of warm-up. So let's look and see, variations like adding neutral players, limiting it to 2 touch. One thing that we used to like a lot was we used to count the consecutive number of passes. And if a team could get to 10 or 15 or 20 consecutive passes, then there was a forfeit from the other team, that kind of stuff. If the defending team was doing too well or were in a tight space, then I'd make one of the defending team kneel or could only walk. So then really they were up against 4.5 players, that kind of stuff. So another one we used to do was 6v6 plus 3. So in this example, what I would use is the 3 center midfielders I would count as neutral players. So it'd be darks against yellows, and the 3 neutral players would be the midfielders. And so the object of this game is that I was always wanting the midfielders to be showing for the ball. I'd be watching it and I'd be asking them, they should be getting almost every pass. Basically it's 9 against 6. So they should be showing to each other. Now, used to make rules up like the midfielders could not pass to each other. or we'd have one where the midfielders had to pass to each other. So let's see. With the 4v4 with neutral players on the outside. Now this is okay. This was good, but I didn't like it as much as the earlier ones because it's a little contrived. You know, you'd have your outside players; they'd be stood still, so that wasn't ideal. But you could make it so that um, you know, the outside players had to move, the outside players had to play one touch or two touch. You could even make it where the outside player had to come in for whoever passed them the ball, and in that way they'd hold jerseys and you could have them swap jerseys. Okay, so let's talk about line drills. I used to like to do line drills occasionally. Now you might say, oh, line drills are no good, and yes, I would agree for the most part they are. But if we had a tough weekend of 3 or 4 games, and we come into practice on Monday, I didn't want them running around too much. So I'd use this time to maybe we could really focus in on the technique and be real demanding about the technique. So we would do some line drills maybe to warm up, where simple ones like this, where they'd pass the ball and then jog to the other line. It's more kind of not a cool down, but an opener kind of session to loosen the muscles from the tough weekend that they just had. And here we'd really concentrate on drilling that pass nice and firm, keeping it on the ground, making sure that first touch was perfect. So really have them concentrate on focus on that. Now we could make it a little more interesting. We could have fewer people in the line. So you could have just like 3 in each line. So really you were never waiting in line longer than a few seconds, because by the time you got to the back of the other line, you know, within 3 or 5 seconds, it was your turn to receive a ball and make your pass. So we could also make it competitive here by having, you know, 2 or 3 groups side by side. So after we'd focused on the technique a little bit, we'd have them go in 3 groups side by side, and we'd say, okay, first 1 to 20 passes wins. But it had to be a good pass and a good first touch. If you messed up with a bad first touch, and the ball bounced in the air, or it was you just didn't control it well, then you had to start from 0 again, or you went back on your score by 5 passes or something like that. And so it made it fun and made it competitive, and you know, the girls had a lot of fun with that. And again, you could do variations on that one, like we'd do a give and go, so you'd pass and do a give and go, that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's look at circle drills. We used to use these for warm-ups as well. These were pretty good. I got these from David Williams, who coached he coached at Everton, at Norwich, at Leeds. When I went to see him, he was the academy director at Manchester United, and he coached the Welsh national team as well. And so I got a lot of these drills from him. So this kind of stuff, you'd make a big circle. You'd have people in the middle with a ball, and in this example, they'd just dribble to a person on the outside, pass them the ball as they got closer, and then swap positions with them. So if you're on the outside, you're always moving in. If you're on the inside, you're always moving out. So there is constant movement. The players on the outside are not stood there for too long. And again, there's lots of variations on these. So this variation was you play a give and go with the outside person. Let's see what else we've got. Oh, then you could do, give and goes, overlaps, and basically anything you can think of, and come up with all kinds of ideas for these circle drills. Another type of circle drill we used to do was where we'd work on technique. Same thing, so we could work on heading it back or controlling it with your thigh and bringing the ball down under control. So the person on the outside would have a ball in their hands. They would throw it, a person from the inside, player from the inside would run towards them. They'd throw the ball, and that person would either head it back or bring it on their thigh, control it, whichever one we were doing at that time. And then the person in the middle would then turn and run across the circle and find another person to do the same thing, throw them the ball. And then we'd switch positions. Okay, so in this one here, the player from inside would run towards the outside player, basically showing for the ball, asking for the pass. The player would make him the pass, and then you can do practice all kind of turns, and the player in the middle turns with the ball, runs somewhere else, and passes them the ball back. And you can try all kinds of turns on that one. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the technical drills we did. Now with heading, I know there's an issue with heading now, but at this time there wasn't. But I always love to do heading into goal, or over the goal. And I'll explain over the goal in a second. But it was the girls found it a lot more fun to be able to head into goal to try and score than they would just be to head it back to a person or head it into space. Now, asking players to hit corner kicks in for players to head a ball into the goal at the under 14 level just wasn't practical because there wasn't enough quality deliveries to be able to make the heading work. So we used to have the players line up and throw the ball. And we used to do regular throws, a regular throw-in, so that they got practice with throw-ins, I guess. But they would throw the ball, players would run into the goal box and head it into the goal. Now we asked them to head the ball down, and we worked on all kinds of heading technique, timing of runs, all that kind of stuff. And what we would do in this instance, as you can see, we'd have 3 teams. So 3 teams of 5, let's say. So one team would be throwing the ball, the other team would be heading the ball. You'd have a team behind the goal, fielding the balls and getting them back to this team that's throwing the ball. And we'd do just a few minutes, and then we'd rotate and switch teams, and then we'd rotate again. And again, we used to make this. I used to do a lot of things in practice that we made competitive. Now, when I say competitive, most of it was a fun kind of competitive. So here, I'd give the girls points for scoring headers. Down on the ground, they'd get more points than if they scored it heading it high. They'd lose points if they headed it over the goal. And so it was kind of fun deal doing that. And it was active. The ones behind the goal were always running, chasing the ball. The ones throwing the ball were always getting ready. The ones heading the ball were obviously always running in there. And as I said, we rotated. So sometimes I used to get them practicing what I would call defensive headers. So in these instances, we'd throw the ball and we'd ask them to head the ball as far over the goal and as high over the goal as they could. So we were looking for really big headers, and they'd get points for how far those headers were as well. So that was a simple one there. Okay, now we used to do a lot of shooting technique because I was big into shooting. You can't score goals with a bad shooting technique. So we used to work a lot on shooting. Now, what I would do is we'd practice shots mostly from angles because I wanted them to get into the habit of shooting across the goal to the far post. And so we used to give them a system here where I would give them points. For a perfect one, they'd get, let's say, 4 points that would go inside the far post. Then they might get 4 points if it doesn't quite get there. Then they might get 3 points if it goes there, but it's not quite hard and low, or if it's high. You might get 2 points if it goes to this side and goes in. 1 point maybe if it goes to this side of the goal, or it's just a well-struck shot that's not correct, or it goes in the correct place, but it's not a well-struck shot. So I'd give them points between 0 and 4, something like that. But I would also they would also get points if it missed this post, but it went inside this cone. Because that is a good shot. It just misses the goal, but it's across the goal, which we're looking for. If that's where they're aiming, the far post, if they're just slightly off and it misses that way, I would rather that than a ball that goes the near post and high over the goal. So they still would get a point for that. Okay, now we used to do, again, same thing. We'd break into 3 teams. 3 teams of 5. So this team would shoot as the arrows suggest here. this team would shoot, and they'd both go at the same time. And then you'd have one team behind that was fielding the ball. And then after a few minutes, you'd rotate. This team would move over to this cone. This team would move behind the goal, and this team would come over here and be a shooting team. So we used to use lots of different options here that they have. In this one, they just run directly up to the cone, look like they were taking the ball inside, fake and push the ball outside, and then take a shot. And again, this was used to really focus on the technique. We do it firstly with just having them focus on the technique. Hit the ball low and hard, hit it with your laces, hit it with your instep, swivel your hips to get the ball across to the far post, and we'd work on that. Once we'd done some of that, we'd then do the same thing like we did for the heading and the line drills. We'd make it fun. We'd give them points, and we'd start keeping score. They'd go crazy because if they hit one over the bar, they'd get minus points and stuff like that. So it was a real fun exercise. The girls really enjoyed doing this. And we got, like I said, we got different options. In this option here, they'd pass it to a player on the cone, and that player would lay the ball off, and then they'd shoot. In this option here, we'd ask the player here on the cone to be kind of like a passive defender. So the player would run with the ball and look to take the defender inside, move the ball outside and get the shot, and we'd ask the defender to be a passive defender. And then as time progressed, they'd be less passive and more like a real defender. Okay, in this one here, we would have the first player in line would stand at the cone. The next player would pass in the ball. This player would then do a turn, so we'd practice different kind of turns. Would then do a turn and shoot. And then the player who passed in the ball would then jog to the cone, and they would now be at the cone ready to receive the ball. So you can work on turning there, you can work on shooting. And again, you could add on to this by, instead of having a cone, you could have a passive defender on there as well. And in this one, we had them shoot. So all the others were ball where they're running with the ball and they're facing the goal, going towards the goal with the ball and then shooting. This one is the opposite. This one is where they're getting a ball fed to them from the end line. So they get a ball fed to them here. They run in and they shoot it, and we're asking them here to shoot one touch if possible. And they make this decision. If it's ideal and the ball's coming nicely, they can shoot it one touch. If not, they need to take a touch out of their feet and then hit the shot. And again, we're asking them to hit certain kind of shots, so depending on their positioning. So in this one, for example, we're just asking them to hit low shots. But if they're shooting from an angle out here, we're asking them to hit across the goal. Again, we give them points. The girls used to love all the friendly competitive stuff. Now, defending drills, look, I got to be honest, I didn't really work that much on defending. We basically just worked on the basics, and I can run through this pretty quick because everybody knows these. These are just standard drills for pressure, cover, balance. You've got 1v1, you've got 2v1, so now you're putting the cover in there. Then you got 2v2, that kind of stuff. So basically, it was just individual technique and cover technique that we worked on, and we didn't do too much of it. Then the defending techniques that we worked on, the defending tactics that we worked on those more in attack versus defense situations. I'll explain to you later. Okay, so not much to do there on defending, but let's look at small-sided games. Now, I would do a ton of small-sided games. I'm a big believer in trying to make things as game realistic as possible. And there's certain drills that I see coaches that fall in love with, And yeah, they're good drills, but if a my rule of thumb was if a player has to really think hard and remember how to do this drill or how to do that, then that the amount of thought they have to put into that takes away from the actual learning that they should get from the drill. So I would tend to do a lot of small-sided games. Like for instance, if we were working on give and goes and overlaps, then we'd do some static kind of drills, just going through those give and goes and overlaps and the techniques for doing that. But then I would throw them into small-sided games, maybe a big small-sided game, and say, okay, it's 6v6. You've got two neutral players in there as well, and I want you to look for a give and go every opportunity you can, and the team that does the most give and goes wins. And they just do give and goes like crazy. Now, they didn't always do them in the right position or in the right way, but once we got to that point where they were they were thinking about doing give and goes, we'd then start introducing, okay, now let's do them only in realistic situations. And we'll talk about that, and we bring that into the game. But anyway, I digress. So one kind of small-sided game we had was pretty easy. It was 3v3 with two neutral players on the side. Used to do that. This was good for possession. It was good for shooting. You can limit, you can have different conditions in here, like limiting the neutral players to 1 touch or 2 touch, that kind of stuff. The other thing that I was pretty big on was neutral players. I always loved to play with, small-sided games with neutral players. One is I used to use the midfielders a lot as neutral players, because I always wanted them asking for the ball from whoever they could and getting real used to showing for the ball all the time. But it also helped the game go better. Now, if you Liverpool or Manchester United or Barcelona and you're a pro team and you've got those kind of quality players, you may not use neutral players as much. But to get the same kind of success, neutral players to me were big time. Okay, so here's it 5v5 with neutral players on all sides. This was a possession game. Again, you just keep possession. And we used to have different kind of conditions for this, which was, only use neutral players if you need to, or we'd count consecutive passes, but passes to neutral players don't count. Just basically getting them moving around passing. And here you would switch the teams, obviously. After a while you put the 4 reds in and the blacks would, or the yellows would go on the outside. Now, this game here, this is a bit of a crazy game, and it does take the players a little while to understand this, and I know I mentioned earlier that wasn't a good thing, but when I saw this at Glasgow Rangers Academy, and I just thought it was a great game. The kids loved it, and once they figured it out, it's good. Basically, you've got 4 goals and you've got 4 teams, and each team can score in any of the other team's goals. So if the black team is defending this goal, for instance, they can score in any of those goals. And if a team concedes a goal, then they've got to take a player off. So now they've only got 2 players. So you're trying to score in any one, and it really makes the players think. It makes the players keep their head up. It makes the players, just focus intensely. So that's kind of a fun game. Now this one here, this diamond shooting game, this I got from my dad, who was a coach with Howard Wilkinson. He coached with him at Leeds United and Sheffield Wednesday. And apparently this was their favorite shooting game. Now the field is set up as it would be here, and for my under 14s, this was an okay field size as well. Basically, you used to have the penalty area with lines marked or cones marked from the corner of the penalty area to the corner of the 6-yard box and the end line. and then you would duplicate that shape or mirror that shape opposite, going the opposite way from the penalty area. Best played with 2 large goals, obviously, and you would have 2, and now you could have 3, it depends on how you wanted to play this. 2 or 3 players in each half, so it could be 2 or 3 players in each half and 1 attacker or 2 attackers in the opposite half. Now I think I work best with this with 2 players and 1 attacker in each half. And the goalkeeper you could have as a field player. You could use this for goalkeeper practice, or you could use it strictly for shooting practice. And instead of having goalkeepers, you could have a third player who was also a shooter. So here's how it worked. You basically encouraged shooting at every single opportunity. So if this player passed to this player, if he had half a chance to shoot, you would want them to shoot. So there's no reason to do anything else. You're within shooting range, and if you got the opportunity, you shoot. Now the 2 defenders close that person down, but they're not allowed out of their half. Now you can have a condition where they are allowed out of their half to close him down. So you've got all kinds of different conditions. Now, if the other condition is here, or a variation, is if this player can't shoot, he can play it to the forward. And again, you could have conditions where the forward can turn and shoot, or the forward can't score. He's got to lay it back off to maybe this player here for him to shoot. There are so many variations and conditions that you can have on here, but this was just a pretty exciting, fast-paced shooting game that mirrored the real game. And you would have, I used to split it into 4 teams, and you'd have 2 teams playing, and 1 team behind this goal, 1 team behind this goal. And so you would just rotate. So you play for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then the next teams would go in, and they'd play for 2 or 3 minutes. And again, you'd have to have plenty of balls behind the goals, and that's why these teams behind the goals, they were there to field the balls. But I love that shooting drill. My players love that shooting drill, and I highly recommend that shooting drill. And you can experiment with all the different kinds of variations. Okay, this is another game that I got, and again, I really enjoyed this game, and so did our players. This was a short, long, and I got this from David Williams when he was at Manchester United. So I got the circle drills from him, I got this from him, and basically you had you would have 5v5 or something similar depending on the number of players you got. You'd play in an area of, well, depended on the size of the age of the kids, I guess, but you could have it 60 by 40 or even bigger. And the 2 teams would just keep possession until they created an opportunity where they could pass the ball from one half of the field over to the target player on the opposite side. So in this instance here, this dark player passes it to this one, he passes it to this one. If he's not closed down and he's got space, this person here can now hit a long pass over to the target player. And then the target player would roll the ball into the dark team again, and the dark team would do that. And the idea is to close, defensively, players need to close down to not allow the long pass. And if you have possession of the ball, the idea is to pass and move the ball and create space for a player who can now hit a long pass over to a target player. And you'd obviously give points for successful long passes. So this really helped, because one of the things I found, we worked a heck of a lot on passing and possession. And like I said, my girls, they might not have been the best passing team out there, but they were definitely one of the best. And that's out of all the teams we played over the years. We were definitely a good passing team. But one thing that I found was that they would tend to just pass short passes, 10, 15-yard passes. They would not look for a long pass of 30 or 40 yards. And so this really helped with that. So I highly recommend this one. Okay, now, towards the end of the season, we did a lot of attack and defense games. And I thought that our players gained more from these than anything else we did in practice combined. They gained more from this, especially from a tactical standpoint. This basically helped them put into practice in real games what they had learned with their small-sided games and shooting and that kind of stuff. So let me explain. So we play attack v defense. Well, before we played attack v defense, we used to do some shadow play. So there'd be no defenders on the field, and we'd go through some, possible combinations for them. For example, we would show them give them combinations on how they could switch the ball from one side of the field to the other. And they couldn't do that by going from this person to this player to this player to this player, because other teams know what you're trying to do when you're going that way, and it's too predictable. So we'd give them ones where they went to this player, back to this player, and this player maybe switched to this player. We'd give combinations like dealing with the forwards. This player could pass the ball into the forward, who could lay it off for this player, who could then play a ball into the corner for this player who's running on there to get that across it. You name it, there's tons and tons of different combinations that you can give, and it depends on your style of play and your formation as to what combinations you want to give them. But we used to just give them those for examples. We never said, okay, this is what you have to do. But we just wanted to get them the idea of, look, these are the combinations, and anything like this is what you should be looking for. So once we did that, then we would have attack v defense. So we'd have the full team on there, the 10 field players, and then we'd have the 5 players who would be on, if we were starting a game, they'd be the 5 players on the bench. So in this example here, we've got 1 player defending these back 4. Now that was hard work, but that player worked really hard sprinting up and down the field. This 1 player would mark these 2 players. This one would mark the left and the center. This player would mark both forwards. So players should always be open. If this player is leaning towards guarding that player, then we can pass. This one should be open, and we can pass to that player. And the idea was that the team in possession, the team of 10 or 11, the team attacking, should have tons of success, so that they can practice, going up the field in passing combinations and trying different things out. We don't really want the defenders to be successful in this. We want them to try, but we don't want them to be successful. So let's have a look at some of the variations. Now you could change that again. So sometimes we would have a defender guard these 2 players, and a defender guard these 2, guard those 2, 1 defender guarding the 2 center midfielders, 1 for the forwards. But this was my preferred one. Okay. So let's look at some of the combinations here just to show you. So this is an example of a combination to the forward's feet. So we pass here, go to here, and then play into the forward's feet. And then that forward would have options of playing down there, playing back, maybe turning and playing it to the forward up here. This fullback here would have an option of playing into the forward's feet, or maybe playing long here to this forward who's making that run. So we just go through some of those combinations. Now, when you've got defenders, now we would do all these without, like I said, in shadow play, but we would then do we'd let them play with the defenders in there, like I suggested here. So we'd have the defenders in, and now we would work on these combinations. I just haven't put the defenders in so that we don't clutter the diagram. But here's an example of what I mean by how we used to help the players make decisions. So in this example here, we looked at, well, let's go back one stage. It was passed here, it got to the fullback played the ball into the forwards feed who came in to show for it. Now there's going to be a defender here guarding these two forwards. And I used to ask that defender is, once the ball has gone 3 passes, you have to make a decision and get within touching distance of one of the 2 forwards, which means the other forward is going to be free. And the reason we did that was so that this fullback here, for example, 1, 2, 3 passes, now has a choice. Who is she going to pass to? Well, if the defender is guarding this player here who's coming in to show for the ball, then her choice should be to pass to the forward that's open. If that defender guards this forward here who goes long, then the forward who's showing for the ball should be free, and we make the decision to pass to those. So that was the same all over the field. There's one defender for 2 players. And after so many passes, we'd ask them to, look, you've got to make a decision. You can't split the 2. We want you to guard one player within touching distance. That would leave players open, and that's then basically making our players make the decision of who to pass to. So there's decisions to be made as well. Okay, there's just an example there of switching the play where we go from here to here to here, back to a defender and out again. Again, all this would be done with defenders on the field, and here switching the play using a forward. Different progressions here. We'd show them all these different combinations and they'd figure out on their own. So, some that we used to use, like here, this one here, we'd ask the midfielders to combine. So after we'd done this for a while, this kind of combination passing, the way I used to work the session was I would get the attacking team all together in a huddle, and I would give them a condition. And I'd say, like in this instance, I'd say, okay, you can only score a goal, or you can only attempt to score a goal after the 2 midfielders have combined. So pass the ball around all you want, but you can't score until the midfielders have combined. Now, we'd then start from here and we'd play. Now, the good part about that was the defending team didn't know what the condition was. They knew we had a condition, but they didn't know what it was. So they would be defending, not knowing that we had to have the midfielders combine, because if they knew, they could just stop the midfielders combining pretty easy. So we used to do it without the defending team knowing. So in this example here, you can only score a goal after 5 passes, or you can only score a goal from a wide player, or you can only score a goal, in this example here. Let me go back one more. You can only score a goal once the forward has touched the ball, or once the ball has been played into the forward's feet, or let's look at another one we did. We do them for like the midfielders there, then we do them for forwards, once the forwards have combined. So we can't score until the forwards have combined, so we work on that for a little bit. Or then you can only score from after a long pass. So that would be, we might do this one after playing that short, long game. And so we'd make a few passes, and then we'd maybe make a long pass to a running midfielder. Let's have a look at, we used to do them for only score from a cross. We only score after you've done a give and go or an overlap. And again, the only the attacking team knew what only the attacking team knew what the condition was. The defending team didn't. Now, once they figured it out, then we'd have to change to another condition. So here's one where you can only score from a cross. So we'd ask the wide player, even if she'd already beat the defender, we'd ask them to imagine there was a defender chasing you or real close by, and we need you to run to the corner and put a cross in, and then we'd work on timing of runs and all that kind of stuff. So here's the one where you could only score from an overlap or a give and go. There they are. Okay, another one here, you can only score after a forward has tried a turn. So in this example, I would put defenders maybe on both forwards, but I would instruct the defenders that they can't go and steal the ball, they can only defend from behind. So that would allow the forward to get the ball to their feet. And then we'd work with the forwards on teaching them how to turn with the ball when under pressure from a defender. And sometimes they may not be able to turn. They might have to hold the ball and lay it off. And then, we play it to the other forward and they turn. But the unlimited number of different things here. So in this is an example where a forward couldn't turn. They lay the ball off, they run around, and they play a quick give and go behind the defender. So that's about it. One of the last things we do, and again, this is nothing new. We used to play a game called up a goal, down a goal. I'm sure all coaches know that. And we'd play for, 5-10 minutes as if we were down a goal and we needed to score. And this wasn't in the situation of the attack v defense. We tried to even the teams out. And so one team was up a goal, the other team was down a goal, and there was 5-10 minutes left in the game. So one team was trying to defend the lead, the other team was desperately trying to score. And then we'd go through things like, getting the ball forward quickly, looking for scoring opportunities quickly, not giving the ball away, keeping calm while playing at a faster pace, that kind of stuff. And from the defending side, it would be, here's how we want to line up defensively. Here's how we want to just keep our composure, and how the forwards can help by keeping possession of the ball up in the attacking half. All the kind of things you want to teach your team to do if they're up a goal or down a goal in the last 5-10 minutes of a game. And that was a really fun game. The girls enjoyed that. And it also gave them a lot of confidence. When we were in situations, there were lots of situations where we're playing a close game and we're up by 1 goal. And, we might be hanging on with 5 minutes to go, but they had confidence because they'd done that enough times in practice. So that's about it. That's gone through the list of kind of training sessions that we did. As I said, there was no special formula for the training sessions. We focused mainly on technique and movement in warm-ups. I didn't do too many what people call drills. We did lots of small-sided games and attack v defense. So, and there's a book, Coaching a Team to a National Championship. If you wanted that, it's available on our website. So, hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time.